This week we continue our Sutta exploration series, with this being week 146. For this week, I wanted us to go and revisit the collection of oldest suttas that we know of. Next to the Udana in Kuddaka, we have the Sutta Nipāta, which we have explored in a few suttas in the past. But I wanted us to go and look at the first of the suttas, of the Sutta Nipāta. The Sutta Nipāta, again, were the discourses that the teaching, where we see the teachings of the Buddha being given to people, students, many of whom were later seen in other suttas as bhikkhus, as arahants. And those teachings from the Sutta Nipāta do show up in other discourses, as in the Majjhima Nikāya or the Anguttara Nikāya, etc. For example, a few years ago, we did the Majjhima Sutta, and where we see 6 bhikkhus sitting there exploring, trying to understand as to what Lord Buddha meant by the seamstress, the analogy, the simile of the seamstress that he mentions in the Sutta Nipāta, specifically in the Parayana section of the Sutta Nipāta, which happens to be the 5th book of the Sutta Nipāta, where he was answering a series of questions from the Brahmin youth, Tissamitteya. And so these bhikkhus, later on, you see them discussing in the Anguttara Nikāya, sitting there, 6 of them, trying to figure out as to what Lord Buddha mean by that. So each of these 6 bhikkhus presented their own ways of understanding that teaching. But it's wonderful to hear a reference being made within the suttas of another sutta. That's key, to see the historicity, the documentation, if you will, of the series of events. In fact, the teachings that we see, the historical development over the decades, because we forget that the Buddha taught for 45 years. That's a lifetime, especially in those days. Many people did not even reach 40 years old, 40 years of age. The Buddha died at the age of 80. So did, around the same age as many of the other bhikkhus, as in the case was with Venerable Sariputta and Venerable Moggallana. They were about 6 months older than the Buddha in age. But they lived into their, at least in the beginning portion, of 80 years old, 80 years of age. So a lot had happened during those 45 years. Many of the sasanas, the dispensation of the Buddha's teachings, we find in the Sutta Nipāta, which is why I translated it a few years ago, the whole Sutta Nipāta. It's available, audio version of it, as well as the PDF of it on the website. But I wanted us to go back to the beginning of the Sutta Nipāta, the Uraga, which is the collection or the group of discourses with the theme of the snake, Uraga in this case. And the first of which happens to be the Uraga Sutta, today's Sutta. So it's easy to find. It's SNP.1.1, Sutta Nipāta 1.1. I know many of you have shown interest in the fact that there's there's a gradual beginning to the sutta exploration with every single, I guess, week or episode, where I touch upon the background. So it's key to kind of pin down as to, again, historically and contextually, as to how does this story, how does this teaching come about? Because whenever we are reading, hearing, exploring a teaching, a discourse of the Buddhas, we always need to look at the other factors, social factors, who was present, who was asking, what state were they in when they were asking. Because from all these nuances, we can also deduce, figure out as to why the teaching was said. And sometimes the person who's asking questions is not even interested in the answer, like the case was with Madhupindika Sutta, with Dandapani, the Brahmin, who didn't like the Buddha, he didn't care for the Buddha, this aristocrat who came around walking on his golden staff, leaning on his fancy carved staff, stick, basically, walking stick, came around and very condescendingly asks a question. That is from the Madhupindika Sutta, from the Majjhima Nikāya, middle-length discourses, which we have covered about 4 years ago, maybe more. But he wasn't interested in what the Buddha was saying, was going to give him. So there was a lot of antagonism. So it is crucial for us to look at these contextual elements. In this case, no one is particularly, at least we're not going to see anyone asking the question, a question. Here we're going to see the teachings in verse form. Most of the, if not all, Sutta Nipāta discourses or the suttas are in verse form. So it's arranged, organized in one sutta, of course, one discourse, but it comes in the series of 17 different verses. And we're going to see the tail end of it, of each of these verses, the refrain, let's say, or in a song you have the refrain, the thing that repeats at the end. We're going to see the Buddha using the same 2 lines again and again and again for each of the 17 verses. And it's crucial for us to pay attention to that and not kind of shut it out of our awareness as something, well, it's a refrain, who cares? It's the same thing repeating. No, the whole premise, the whole spine of the sutta is about that. So please bear in mind, which gives the sutta its name. In fact, it gives the whole collection of suttas in this whole book of the Sutta Nipāta, the first book, Uraga Sutta, its name. The significance of the whole theme, in a sense, starts with this sutta, the whole Sutta Nipāta. And oftentimes, scholars have completely missed out on these, excuse me, the very first suttas, the discourses that we find in each of the major books, major collections, as in the Digha Nikāya, we have the Brahmajala Sutta, the net of views. The Majjhima Nikāya, the middle-length discourses, we have the Mula Pariyaya Sutta. Okay. And the same goes with Anguttara Nikāya. You have, a series of, that one is more broken up into pieces. So it's kind of bite-sized chunks initially, at least. But what I've noticed is scholars used to mention how, well, it's too philosophical. It's not interesting as the other stories, the other discourses that play out later in the texts. And that's terrible. So we haven't covered the Brahmajala Sutta. We haven't covered the Mula Pariyaya because I finished the Brahmajala Sutta. No, Mula Pariyaya I have finished. But the Brahmajala, they're very long. And they cannot possibly be completed in 1 week session. So because of our sessions being every other week, so it will take forever. So I'm thinking of how to making it at least summarizing the themes of those suttas. But what I'm trying to say is the first sutta of each collection, like Nikāya, like the Digha Nikāya or the Majjhima Nikāya, the first sutta sets the tone. It's like the code. It's the secret code, the language. It's the Rosetta Stone, if you like. Well, that was discovered to figure out what the hieroglyphics meant until Champollion from Napoleon's time. He actually was there and he saw this rock. They discovered this rock. And on it, there were 3 different languages written, scribed. One of them was the hieroglyphics. The other ones was, I think, Greek, and the other one was Coptic or something. That was a code that was cracked. So each sutta was placed in its proper position numerically as a first beginning sutta discourse of a book for a reason by the Arahants in the first council. So please, the order matters. That's what I'm trying to say. And usually they are heavy. Heavy because there's so much that they need to make sure that you understand. Because they're giving us the map as to how the rest of the suttas, they're not just a bunch of stories, They're not just a bunch of similes. They're both like an index and glossary combined into one, along with the whole notes section. Excuse me. So, bearing that in mind, apologies, bearing that in mind, we begin today the Uraga Sutta, being the first of the Sutta Nipāta. Again, one of the earliest teachings of the Buddha. So let's begin. So Sutta Nipāta 1.1. It is from the Kuddaka Nikāya, the shorter discourses, where we also find the Theragata, Therigata, and Dhammapada, and Udana and Itivuttaka, of course, as I mentioned before. It is from the Sutta Nipāta, the Uraga Vagga, and the name is Uraga Sutta, the snake. Let's begin. The Buddha says, when anger arises within his heart, the bhikkhu quickly tosses it out of his heart, much like medicinal herbs that expel the venom of the wound received from a snake's bite. Thus, the bhikkhu gives up this shore and the one beyond, much like a snake giving up its used-up skin. There's a term in English called sloughing off or sloughing off, or sometimes I've heard it being pronounced as sloughing off, S-L-O-U-G-H, slough. It's the shrugging off of the old skin that the snake has, the reptile has. It's peeling it off. And if you've seen documentaries, the snake sometimes will scratch, just gently brush against harder surfaces like rocks to start the peeling process, because it doesn't have any arms or fingers or hands to pull its skin, the old one, out, because the new one is underneath. In a sense, it always is being reborn, rejuvenated. So that's the image that the Buddha here is using. It's used up skin, the snake's used up skin. Now, this is in reference to the Arahant. When we hear here, when we see the term, the Bhikkhu, it's a reference to the Arahant. The reference is being made here also for the Arahant who has crossed over from this shore to the one beyond. This shore is a reference to the world we live in, but also the world of the senses, our habituation, our comfortable existence, our identification with the body, the sensuality, all the things that the six senses bring to us. All of this is the world. It's the internal and external sense spheres. What we do with them. It's this arena of life, of existence, of our willingness and wanting to keep coming back into newer and newer experiences, newer and newer lifetimes, relationships, bouncing ourselves from one to the next. Bhava is another term for it, re-becoming or becoming, or the desire to re-become, which drags us into another birth. As we seen in the Paticca and the dependent arising principles. These all lead to that. So the shore here, or the nearer shore, is where we are. Not necessarily, physically only. But this is very emotional, very, very existentially real. This is, in French, it's called raison d'être, or the reason for being in English, yes. Reason for being. And so we're fixated on the nearer shore. It is, for us, everything. When you become obsessed over things that are happening to you or happen to you, you're fixated on that. The identification as this is who I am. What the Buddha called atta versus anatta. The non-substantiality of me as this broken off piece from the rest of the existence, which I can identify as me, myself, mine, divorced from everything else. No, there's no such thing. Because it's all systemically based. It's all leaning on other factors. So you remove one piece, everything falls apart. It's, like a domino effect. It's all related. It's all piled up. There's Ghana and Rasi Sanya. Ghana is the compact. We have the idea that it's all compact. It's all a solid unit, this self, this me, this person. In this case, the snake believing that that is its only skin that it's got. That's it for a whole lifetime. And then suddenly it's starting to itch after that time comes in its lifespan, where it has to slough off its old skin because it's become old. In fact, it's a nuisance. It's uncomfortable. It's itching. It's itching. So what does it do? It starts to remove it. Sometimes you have this thing that you've striven so much to obtain, and you have it, whether it's a thing, an object, a role in life, a status, a career, as I said, a possession, something, or even a relationship, a partner. But after some time, so long as life is progressing as it's supposed to, meaning you're developing yourself, if that person and their personality or the situation or the thing that was in question no longer serves this newer version of you that's developing, then what essentially happens is you become like that snake that wants to scratch off and remove, slough off its skin, old skin. It becomes intolerable. It becomes painful to be around that thing. It becomes an eyesore. So these are images that can help us to relate to this verse. But this is specifically talking about the Arahant here. By the way, the first 6 verses, this is one of them, were said on different occasions. This one, for example, was spoken by the Buddha in Alavi, a region of Alavi, where I believe it was when the bhikkhus had, some bhikkhus had went ahead into the forest and chopped off a tree. They chopped off a tree. At that time, the rule was not instituted yet that we bhikkhus are not supposed to, or not allowed to, according to the Vinaya, to cut down trees. So the Buddha was instituting the rule right at this point when he decided to also say this verse. So eventually the compilers of the canon, the first council, they combined these verses together because thematically they went beautifully together. So when anger arises within his heart, the bhikkhu quickly tosses it out of his heart. What do we do with the anger that comes up, with the sense of discomfort? We start to fight it. We hold on to it. It's painful, but it's almost like the body trying to create pus around that foreign object, whether it's a thorn or a wood chip or something, the splinter that went into the skin. So it becomes inflamed, doesn't it? It becomes inflamed, but it becomes pussy, and it also becomes swollen, that area. But it cannot throw it out yet. So we need to look at our emotions not as things of our own, basically. They are of our own making, in a sense, given the context and the situations, elements, this and that. But we identify and we make them our own. My past, my future, my pain. So long as there is that holding on, emotions are going to be next that pile up, and they will become like cement. They will become hardened, and they will harden us. They will harden and toughen, crystallize, thicken, concretize the heart and the mind state, where you no longer are able to see what's in front of you. That's why you get on a bus or a train going back home after the work day is over, and you look at people's faces. They're hardened. They're glued to their screens or their newspapers, if there are any left. But usually people are just hardened. New things occur, but they can't see it. They can't see it with innocence. They can't see it with presence. Why? Because we are at one with the anger. But in this case, Buddha is saying the bhikkhu quickly tosses it out, much like medicinal herbs that expel the venom of the wound received from a snake's bite. So this is the reason why we have the first, the sutta being called that, the simile of the snake's bite. And that's what they teach you in survival skills, in the woods, outdoor skills, etc. When you get bitten by a snake, hopefully you don't have any cavities or anything like that, they say, or any wounds, open wounds in your mouth or on your mouth. You or whoever is available, they need to suck out the venom from that part of your body and spit it out. That's a quick chance that the person has to survive. So they knew about this technique, but you nevertheless have to apply some medicinal herbs which continue the suction out of the venom, out of the body. But how do we do that with anger? How can we do that with anger? By recollecting something as this, the simile of the snake. The example here given, medicinal herbs that expel the venom of the wound received from a snake bite. Can you relate to your anger like as if it were a snake bite? Instead of identifying the culprits, the people who have harmed you, the people who have made you mad, angry, the unfairness, etc., etc. Instead of being sucked into that whole storyline, can you quickly look at it as a snake bite? And the way to test if it is such a thing, such a terrible thing, look if there is agitation in the mind. The agitation is going to tell you reams, gives you details as to why something is wrong. And that's all we need. We don't have to get into the details. We just need to know if there is agitation or not, because when you're agitated, that's the other quality of anger, by the way. It's heat, another quality of anger, tension, another quality of anger. So, but agitation is key. So agitation will be the telltale sign that there's something wrong, because the stillness in the mind and the heart has now been shuttered. They've been shut down. It's no longer there. So in essence, the Arahant is someone who's no longer agitated, because the moment something happens, they just leave it there and then. They don't pick it up. They don't make it their own. They don't wear it like boots, like, clothing, tight-fitting clothing. They don't do that. They don't take ownership of it either. The pain, the suffering, like when that person that I mentioned in previous sessions, who came and slapped Venerable Sariputta on the back. The Venerable Sariputta, the chief disciple to the Buddha, did not say, "Who hit me? Who was that person who hit me?" and went after him with a piece of, with a stick or his bowl to hit him with his, on his head with it. No, he didn't even turn around to look at who was it that hit him. He wasn't a robot. He wasn't made out of dead wood. He felt all of the things that people feel, but he drops it right then and there. He doesn't allow the fuse of the dynamite called anger to be lit, because that's all it takes. Every day we have plenty of reasons to get angry, depending on what is your level of tolerance. But here, the Arahant is somebody who's already gone beyond this shore to the other. The other meaning freedom. Freedom of what? Freedom of the six senses. Freedom from birth and death. There's no re-becoming. The person has crossed over the flood. And there's no way that sense of identification will ever come up again. That's why they are on the solid ground in the farther shore. They're safe. Nothing could shake them. Not anicca, not dukkha, and definitely there's no anatta anyhow. While in this body, this is a bhikkhu or an arahant who is not dead, by the way. The snake doesn't die when it's sloughing off its old skin. In fact, it becomes even more beautiful with a sheen on its scales. It's a new skin. It's a new life. So the Arahant is not somebody who just like, okay, packed up and just, okay, so long, guys, I'm gone. I'm dead. I'm going. No. Life begins for such a being. in an unprecedented way. Next verse. The bhikkhu pulls out lust completely from its roots, like the plucking of lotuses with both flower and stalk combined. Thus, the bhikkhu gives up this shore and the one beyond, much like a snake giving up its used up skin. So earlier we saw the anger, now we see the lust. Lust or passion, you can think of it, raga. You can't trim the edges of raga. You can't trim the edges of lust and say that you've done a good job. You're just making bonsai, bonsai plants. They're going to keep growing. You're just going to trim the edges and make it look nicer and more. No, until something heavy comes and falls over your head, and now the lust comes up. You see that thing that you always wanted in your past and you never got and you gave up on. Suddenly one day, you who think that you are beyond passion, given the right soil, given the right environment, suddenly it shows up, the lust. And you're surprised, oh, I'm beyond it. What is happening? Arahants do not have that because they pulled it out. Just like the lotuses in Southeast Asia, they go and farmers, they collect lotuses with the stalk and the flower. And they eat the stalk and they cook with it, etc. Plucked out. That's what the Arahant has done. Gave up this shore and the one beyond, much like the snake giving up its used up skin. By the way, from this verse on, commentators say that it is these, at least the next 5, this one too, were spoken in Savatthi, Jetavana monastery by the Buddha. So this is no longer in Alavi, but on different occasions. And then the following, beyond that, they're all in Savatthi. Next. So this was about lust. Okay, so they go hand in hand. Anger and lust. Because the moment lust is you're being deprived of lust or experiencing of it, because they both have what as a common denominator? Agitation. Again, that culprit is there hiding. If the mind is agitated, something is up. In the past, people have asked me, but how do you know? How do you know that you're advancing? That your practice is taking you further and further into the path, into the realization of the Dhamma? Well, how is the heart? How is the mind? Is it being agitated by similar circumstances, similar events as before, when you did notice agitation? If there's less and less and less agitation, then you're on the right track. So long as you are still maintaining your connection, direct connection to the Dhamma. What I mean by this is you are not explaining things away. You are not trying to figure things out by your own interpretations, devoid of the Dhamma, because that's what we have today in the world. People have been explaining things to themselves completely separate from what the Buddha taught. That's what makes them adhamma. That's why we're going back to the suttas to see what did the Buddha teach. That's why this is important. Everything that you study in the suttas, they need to augment your life, your understanding of the Dhamma, and especially your practice of the Dhamma. Because I've seen people justifying the presence of lust and even anger, justified it, or greed, justifying it, while thinking that they're fully fledged, dedicated practitioners. And on top of that, they're growing in the Dhamma. Well, how's that possible? Because the agitation shows. The agitation cannot be hidden for long. especially for a meditating mind. It shows up very quickly. The bhikkhu dries up craving in his heart, making it totally remainderless. Much like the drying up of a swiftly flowing shallow stream. Thus, the bhikkhu gives up this shore and the one beyond, much like a snake giving up its used up skin. Noticing if there's craving in the heart is key. Otherwise, how are you getting rid of craving? Craving is tanha, craving with its constant thirst for more. I'm not satisfied. You get this, and now you're like, yeah, this is good. This is good. It's kind of losing its shine for me, its brilliance, its intensity, its juiciness. Oh, that one over there is good. So now we drop this and we go after that. This is story of life. This is all about, in a nutshell, living on this side of the shore, on this shore, the nearest shore. That's what the six senses are always being used as conduits for newer ways for craving to constantly bring us things for us to long for, yearn for, desire, and want, which the Buddha used only one word for, tanha, in this case. But the Arahant has dried up, as if that was a shallow stream. It's been completely dried up in the heat of the summer. So craving is like that. It's completely dried up. In fact, there's no remainder left. If you dig even 10 feet, 10 meters deep, you won't find any moisture left. It's been completely dried up. Again, this is not for us to simply read these verses or listen to them and be full of accolades towards the Arahant, this unachievable, otherworldly character we hear about. No, this is not really, it's not going to be beneficial then in any pertinent way. But they have to be pertinent for us. They have to matter to us. Why? Because they need to help us, guide us towards becoming this. This is not somebody else's life that we're reading about, that we should be reading about. No, this is a familiarization as to what it takes, what needs to happen. You are here, you're listening to the Dhamma, you're practicing the Dhamma. Why? How often do you stop? Do you pause and ask, why am I practicing the Dhamma? Why am I even interested in the Dhamma? Of course, many of us will have different reasons. We come from different avenues, different experiences in life, different lifespans, experiences, intentions behind. But this is a key question that needs to be asked by every single one. Why do you practice? Some people over the years, when I ask them, they're just like, they don't have an expression. They're just clueless how to approach that. They never thought about it. What do you mean? Like, I like the Dhamma. Like, what does that mean? You like the Dhamma? Really? What's there to like about the Dhamma? Like, tell me more. I need to know more. They have no clue. It's just another curiosity. Maybe they read something cutesy by some famous celebrity monk somewhere, or they heard some Hollywood star or celebrity talk about, oh, I'm a Buddhist. Like, oh, silly. Nothing to do with the Dhamma. But why are you here? Why do you read the Dhamma? Why do you sit and practice? You must have the pinch done to you. You must have that pain in your heart. You must have the understanding of dukkha. You must know what it feels like. And you must have reached a point in your life where you are dissatisfied with the answers that people on this side of the shore keep giving you. Whether it's a university, whether it's mommy and daddy, whether it's your boss, whether it's your partner, your wife, your husband, or the TV, the news, whatever, the historians, it has to become personal, and pain is very personal. Your pain is personal. That's why you cannot make somebody else's pain your pain, ultimately. If you don't connect with pain itself from the start, your pain, it's really paying lip service when you say, oh, I'm compassionate towards this person, that person, those people. You don't know pain. Anybody who doesn't know pain doesn't know, again, it could be psychological, it could be emotional, it could be physical, it could be all three. And especially when it becomes existential, when you're all that you've explored, you keep finding out that they had no clue, all these philosophers, these writers, these people. Then it hits you. That sense of hopelessness, that sense of dread comes in. It's like, oh my, I'm going to die. That's painful, by the way. To see loved ones dying, to see people you care about die or get sick, or the things that you cherish vaporize and gone. That's painful. Such a reason is a valid reason. It's compelling enough of a reason to keep you steadily on track with wanting to find out what the Dhamma is about. And unless you have that, it's really intellectual mumbo jumbo, really. Who cares if you know the suttas, you memorize them, or you know this breakdown of that, or this is what that, or even knowing about the similes the Buddha gave, because they would never have penetrated your heart. What happens to a plant if it's okay, if it's not dry? What happens to a plant when you keep watering it? Drowns. And that's what we have. We drown in our own stupidities. Conceit, arrogance, because we are not trying to absorb the Dhamma for the right reasons. This is where a lot of people fail in the Dhamma, because they want to accumulate more knowledge. And it's not about accumulating more knowledge. It's about being real. Looking at what's happening to me, the person. Is there craving? Is there lust? Is there anger? Those are valid questions, existentially real. And then you come across a phrase like this: much like the drying up of a swiftly flowing shallow stream. The bhikkhu has given up this shore and the one beyond, much like a snake giving up its used up skin. The bhikkhu washes away entirely the conceit from his heart, much like a mighty flood sweeps away a rickety bridge made of flimsy reeds. Thus, the bhikkhu gives up this shore and the one beyond, much like a snake giving up its used up skin. Is there conceit in the heart? Conceit has everything to do with comparing and contrasting. At the very least in your mind. Constantly. This is one of the toughest sangyojanas, the fetters, the conceit, which is always engaged in, was this good? Am I good? Am I good? Am I better? Am I better? Or am I, oh, I am worse. I am worse than others. Oh, they are so much better. Oh, I wish I was like them. Da, da, da. And it's not like it inspires you to become like that. No, you keep pushing yourself down with the sledgehammer of conceit. And you're holding the other end, by the way. So you wash it away with practice, because you realize how stupid that is. That person, I don't know their past lives. I don't know their series of intentional actions they've committed again and again. I don't know their paramis, how hard they worked on this or that attribute. All I see is what I'm seeing now in this snippet of time that I came across this person. And they might inspire me, okay, but there's no need for me to compare myself to them. Because again, I don't know them. I don't know even my past lives. Okay. But what I have is this moment, and I have the Dhamma to help me understand what I need to do. At most, I can go and ask them, okay, what did you do to get to this level, to be like this? Oh, you practice sila. Okay, then I can look at my sila. This is a healthy comparison. Okay, there's no harm in that up to a certain point. Oh, how is my sila? Oh, I'm terrible. Okay, let me fix it. So you use these ideals, these individuals, these arahants, and then you improve. You don't look for the easy way out. You look for the right thing to do. And the sila principles, living life with virtue, is the right principle with which to be guided in your life. Okay, at least let me get, and already you are chiseling yourself a new personality, new character. You're developing. So there's no need for conceit or comparing anymore, because you are always checking to see how am I now versus how I was then, as dictated by how much suffering is there in my life now compared to then. How much agitation? Well, wait a minute, I'm not agitated. Why? Well, because I used to be doing things that I would never think of doing now. Okay, it's incrementally adding up the virtue. Suddenly because you're practicing also your mindfulness, your awareness, your cultivation of mind and stability, that's deepening the practice. It's becoming one. It's becoming your natural first mother language, Dhamma. And because all the others will fall away, the bridges like made with flimsy reeds, rickety bridges, because they're not natural to us, really. The Dhamma is. The bhikkhu, having looked at his existences, not finding any essence or substantiality in any one of them at all, resembles it to the quest of one who goes looking for flowers on a fig tree. Impossible for anyone to ever find. Thus, the bhikkhu gives up this shore and the one beyond, much like a snake giving up its used up skin. I remember when I was a teenager, I think I was about 16, and the monastery, the Christian monastery where I had gone to become a monk at the time, there were orchards and fig trees around as well. So there was a walkway. I used to go and stand and look at these trees, especially the fig trees, and I would look at the apple trees, and they would have flowers. Pear trees, they would have flowers. Cherry trees, they would have flowers. I'm like, what's wrong with these trees? The fig trees don't have any flowers, because the flowers, they need to open up, and they're good for pollination for the bees, etc. And then I would see them turning into these beautiful fruits, big figs, but without flowers. So here the Buddha is using that as an example. You won't find a flower on a fig tree. But that's what we do. We go looking for flowers on fig trees in our lives, meaning looking for something permanent in what is designed to be impermanent. Again, I use that word very loosely, designed to be. There's nothing substantial about it. We want, though, substantiality. We want substantial health. Okay, I'm taking my vitamins, I'm eating right, I'm exercising, so I better have 100% beautiful, functioning, not getting sick type of a body from now on. Well, how are you going to put the death into that equation, the fact of death? Decay, that's not going to apply to you until there's like a switch one day, somebody switches off and you die. Is that it? That's a delusion that we have today in society. Well, I'm doing this, so I shouldn't have pain. Why? It's made of elements. Nama Rupa is there. Or, this is a kicker that all of us go through, where we attain to that peaceful tranquility in meditation, and we want to have that always be repeated. That's the meditation. That tells me that I have made it. Nibbāna, any moment is going to happen, right here, any moment, any moment. Why? And this is all delusion, by the way. The tranquility might come, might not come. The nature of the mind is that it moves. The mind is also impermanent, you know, like everything else. It's conditioned. The state that came about, the tranquility, was also conditioned. But we want to concretize that, nail it in place and say, don't you move, don't you move. Stay, stay. But it doesn't. Any person who's a true meditator, not lying to themselves, like these fake jhana people these days, know this to be true. The mind will not always stay in that tranquility or even drop. You have many examples in the suttas of arahants or people or meditators who used to attain to jhanas and they don't after some time. Many examples. That doesn't mean that they've done something terrible. It doesn't mean also that you must have the jhana in order for you to become an arahant either. It's just one of the ways. The jhanas will never take you to Nibbāna. They will guide you, but eventually you have to make that breakaway move, as we saw in the Pottapada Sutta. So it's not the jhanas themselves, really. The training the jhanas give are wonderful, is wonderful. But without vipassana, it's stupid. That's why you have a lot of stupid jhana practitioners, because there's no dhamma in it. There's no vipassana in it. There's no insights. Because there's a love affair with that tranquil state, which was always there, you know, even before the Buddha. That's what Alara Kalama and Uddaka were practicing. You have many, many Buddhist Alara Kalamas today. You have many, many Buddhist Uddaka today and their followers. Buddhist, ironically speaking. So even holding on to something as lovely as tranquility of mind can become a major hindrance. Why? Because you would be at that point looking for flowers on top of a fig tree. You won't find it. Thus, the bhikkhu gives up this shore and the one beyond, much like a snake giving up its used up skin. With no anger left dwelling in him, the bhikkhu has no desires left for becoming anywhere anymore. Thus, the bhikkhu gives up this shore and the one beyond, much like a snake giving up its used up skin. Anger is a tough one to get out of your heart, but it's not a thing, again, to pull out and throw it out. There needs to be an understanding first as to what is happening. And that understanding comes by the revealing the presence of ignorance. This is something that many of us today are not willing to do. Why? Because we have tremendous conceit in us. That I know myself. I know. No, I am right. I know this is the problem. All conceit. So we need to have that sense of humility. The curiosity comes from that sense of humility. And that's going to be the beginning stages of insight to develop. The light basically shining. You see many, many, many suttas we've covered, where the person who heard the Buddha's discourse to them, or the answer to them, the teaching, at the end, they're so full of inspiration. They're so moved, touched. They say, Bhante, it's like somebody who came and brought a lit lamp, an oil lamp, into a darkness for all those with eyesight to see. This is a key phrase that we get again and again in countless suttas. That curiosity, that humility makes room for us. In fact, it makes room for the Dhamma to finally knock some sense into us and allow us to see, oh, this is, oh, I didn't know, oh, this was right in front of me all this time and I didn't see it. Yeah, but now you do. Now you do. This is a part of humility I'm mentioning, which is the opposite of conceit. This is not servility, which is another form of conceit, by the way. In the Anguttara Nikāya, Lord Buddha says, nobody's going to become an Arahant if they have conceit in their hearts. If they have conceit, inferiority conceit, superiority conceit, which, by the way, these two go hand in hand. Sometimes you see a person who says, oh, yes, I bow down to you. I said, oh, you're right. So inferiority complex, because they don't find themselves to be deserving of love and this and that, because they're conceited in their mind. But deep down, it's only one side of the same coin. The other side is, guess what? Superiority conceit. Because at the drop of a hat, they can sell the other person. They can sell all that they said and did and that, and completely ignore all that because it comes out. The arrogance, conceit. This is one of the aspects of conceit. In Buddhism, we have three: conceit, inferiority conceit, and superiority conceit. But it doesn't stop there. The Buddha's statement. He says, anyone who has servility, being servile. Oh, yes. Oh, like a perpetual courtier, like in the queen or some king's, domain or in the surrounded by royalty. You see them in movies, like, your head is always, your forehead is always touching the floor, basically, in your attitude. You don't have a voice. You feel comfortable in being servile. That's, Lord Buddha gives lion's roars here and there. What is that? And when you do become a noble disciple, even as a Sotapanna, Lord Buddha says, you have the right to give a lion's roar. It's natural. But no lion's roar is going to come out of a person who's servile. In fact, not even a mouse's roar you're going to hear from the mouth of such a person, because they're servile. It's still conceit. Obstinacy is the other. And the self-overrating, which we see a lot of these days. I met quite a number of individuals, some of whom were my teachers, unfortunately, that claim to have attained to certain levels that they didn't. They didn't at all. Their behavior showed that, and in my close associations with them, it was revealed that they had nothing to do with the Dhamma. And now their followers today demonstrate that clearly. So these six have to be watched out completely. You have to, because these are major hurdles. Servility, obstinacy, self-overrating, inferiority conceit, superiority conceit, and conceit. This is from the Anguttara Nikāya, from the book of the sixes, yes, because it's six. Anyhow, something to bear in mind. The bhikkhu, having cut the flow of ceaseless thinking, has no more inner agitation left in him. And thus the bhikkhu gives up this shore and the one beyond, much like a snake giving up its used up skin. The flow of ceaseless thinking, we're talking about what? The agitation, right? And one of the key ways to know if there's agitation is if you're jumping from a tree branch, conceptual tree branch, to another. What we can call also papanchas, proliferations. Never steady. And your heart rate is going to show that. Your body temperature will show that. Why? Because you're agitated. Even the thinking about different things, even though it doesn't have the emotional, heavy, hot signature of anger, nevertheless, it will create friction. Literally, you will feel the body's temperature, the brain activity. If they put you into an MRI or a CAT scan machine, they're going to show the registration is going to be there. No longer confused whether to go this way or that, the bhikkhu, with certitude now pervading his heart, is the one who has left all mental proliferations behind. Thus, the bhikkhu gives up this shore and the one beyond, much like a snake giving up its used-up skin. Here you see it clearly, mental proliferation being mentioned, because they build on top of each other, these statements. They're closely associated. That's why they've been placed into the same sutta. Why do we jump from one thought to the next? We're looking for certainty. We're looking for something that sticks. In other words, we are confused. The Dhamma is the opposite of that. That's why you just need a small portion of it, as Lord Buddha says in the Dhammapada. You don't need to know so many verses or the suttas. You just need a small, tiny little piece of Dhamma that you can recall and bring to mind, and you're good to go. Chulapantaka, remember? The dullard, the dumb bhikkhu, dumb even called by his brother. How did he attain? Rajo Haranang, he kept on saying, as he rubbed that piece of white cloth that the Lord Buddha gave him, and he said, I need you to go ahead and clean this up, rub it, hit away, strike away the dirt from it. He was like, yes, Bhante, yes. And then finally he saw that it gotten dirtier and dirtier every time he touched it because of his body touching it, the oils, etc. That was his Dhamma. He didn't know a single verse of the Dhamma. How many do you know? This one has 17 separate verses. I think we are very much better equipped than Venerable Chulapantaka. In fact, even more so than Venerable Sariputta, one might venture out to say. They didn't know as much Dhamma that you have. Known, studied. So find that teaching. It doesn't have to be vastly complicated. Stick to it. No need to be confused. No need to, like my dad used to say, carry the ladder sideways, walking through a doorway. It doesn't work. It's blocking. It doesn't serve the purpose of the Dhamma. So use the little that sticks, the little that you keep reminding yourself of, and go all the way with it, because it will take you straight to Nibbāna. If rubbing a piece of cloth was able to get a very low IQ, if modern terms serve, monk to become an Arahant, what's stopping us? Now, certain beyond any doubts about the path he is on, the bhikkhu knows full well how all things in the world are not what they seem. Thus, the bhikkhu gives up this shore and the one beyond, much like a snake giving up its used-up skin. The world is not here for us to change it. For many, this sounds like blasphemy, because we have been indoctrinated into thinking that we are here to change the world. And and loftier it gets. That's just stupidity, rubbish, nonsense. You have to walk on your own legs. You have to use your own eyesight to see. The world will never be, in fact, what we want it to be. Because when we want something, we are using vipallasas, distortions in the mind, such as wanting something impermanent to be permanent, wanting something that is ugly by nature to become beautiful. Looking at the body and saying, oh, how beautiful it is. Yeah, but let's break it into pieces. Or let's fast forward it 60 years if you're still alive and see all the wrinkles and all that. You wearing diapers if you're still alive. As a grown-up, as an adult. You being neglected. Well, where's the beauty in all that? That's one way of looking at the world not being what it seems to be. Meanwhile, the whole life has been spent, wasted in fact, in you wanting to change the world first before you change yourself. Don't worry about the world. The world will be what it is. And in fact, if the changes that are occurring in you, thanks to you, are compelling enough, don't worry, the world around you will change. In fact, I can say guaranteed. Having left behind all recollections of the past and expectations from the future, no longer being fooled by the world, the bhikkhu lives without any covetousness left in his heart. Thus the bhikkhu gives up this shore and the one beyond, much like a snake giving up its used up skin. We keep going back and forth in this pendulum called craving between past and the future. We find comfort in that. We seek comfort in that. Why? Because it's a cheap and quick way to get out of pain, our own suffering. So we rather tell lies to ourselves, because that's what it is. The Buddha says this clearly in the Dhammapada. He says, the past is dead and gone, and the future is not yet come. But that's where we live. We don't live here. We live over there in the past, memories, depending on the mood that we're in. If we're feeling lousy, we're going to go and reminisce the painful experiences of our past to find, especially if we can find ourselves some friends who can, sit down and enjoy our sobbing. To reminisce those days and see how unfair the world has been. Or to go into the future, whether it's a positive thing, like looking forward to some things to be happening, or dreading things to be happening. Still, it's delusion. Still living in the world. You're living on this side of the shore, this side of the flood. There's no comfort to be sought. There's no security that can be gotten, because there's covetousness. Covetousness is another term you could use for tanha, craving, longing, the quest. The quest should not get you so agitated. That's why it's so important for us to drop back into the body, into the breath, into being mindful, basically. Whether you're saying Buddho, 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 the name of the Buddha, quality of the Buddha, or Arahant, 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 or just watching the breath, or just feeling the softness in your heart of metta, feeling metta vibrate, vibrate. It's not agitation. It's not agitation. And then you feel your whole body enveloped in this beautiful golden egg shape, if you will, sheath, protecting you of metta. And then it grows and grows and grows and grows, and it takes and envelopes the whole cosmos. Can you stay with that? and drop back with your body, drop back with this present moment. How is the mind? Is it agitated? You're in the present. You're not in the future. You're not in the past. Guaranteed. That's why it's not visualization, because the breath, you don't have to visualize about the breath. It's just you're feeling the temperature change at the nostrils right here. When it goes in, there's a coolness. When it comes out, there's a warmth. But the mind gets bored, doesn't it? It wants some colorful things, experiences, images, previews of a future that's never to come, by the way. Meanwhile, the main action is happening right here under your feet. Being free from his past and future, and no longer fooled by the world, the bhikkhu lives without any lust left in his heart. Thus, the bhikkhu gives up this shore and the one beyond, much like a snake giving up its used up skin. This is key, because if you're still fooled by the world and what the world is telling you, how? It's not like somebody comes and knocks on your door. No, we have 6 of those already, called eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, and mind. That's how we're fooled. Nobody else. That's why you need to apply samvara, which is restraint. We have to have restraint. If it's a sight, beautiful sight, okay, let it in, but it's not going to make you lose focus. It's not going to agitate or irritate your mind to start dwelling on its details. If it's something beautiful, are you still dwelling on those details? Or if it's something ugly, are you still disgusted by it? Now, 5 minutes later, that means there's no restraint. Restraint means seeing, just see, like Lord Buddha said to Bahya. When hearing, just hear. There's just the hearing. That's what I'm trying to say. When touching, sensing, with your body, with your tongue, with your nose, let that just be it. And when there's thinking, when there's a thought being cognized, let it be. Like we saw in the Indriya Bhavana Sutta, Lord Buddha says, every thought that comes up, think of it as a drop of water being dropped, let go of, onto a hot, hot pan that's red hot, that's been heated up for a few days, nonstop. It's red. Would the water even reach it? It will evaporate halfway. Let the thoughts that come to your mind be treated like that. Don't dwell on them. This is easier said than done. But we have to try our best, because, of course, it's doable, it's possible, it's wonderful when we do it. But it requires training. Being free from his past and future and no longer fooled by the world, the bhikkhu lives without any hatred left in his heart. Thus, the bhikkhu gives up this shore and the one beyond, much like a snake giving up its used up skin. So here we're seeing we're going to see the 3 defilements, the kilesas, showing up. Same formula being used for them, for each of them, that is. Being free from his past and future and no longer fooled by the world, the bhikkhu lives without any delusion left in his heart, moha. Thus, the bhikkhu gives up this shore and the one beyond, much like a snake giving up its used up skin. With his mental contaminants destroyed, his asavas, the bhikkhu has cut off all the unwholesome roots, the causes for agitation. Thus, the bhikkhu gives up this shore and the one beyond, much like a snake giving up its used up skin. With nothing left for him to take personally nor become inflamed about, The bhikkhu now has no cause for re-becoming at all. Thus, the bhikkhu gives up this shore and the one beyond, much like a snake giving up its used-up skin. But we can't not take things personally. We always want to take things personally. What is needed is understanding. That's what's necessary. Understanding doesn't involve taking anything personally. With nothing left for him to desire or crave any more, the bhikkhu now has no cause for re-becoming at all. Thus, the bhikkhu gives up this shore and the one beyond, much like a snake giving up its used-up skin. The desire or craving is the problem. But again, desire for the Dhamma or desire for Nibbāna, even that has to be dropped at some point. Otherwise, it will create fixation and too much energy output from us. It will create agitation. It will create turbulence in the mind. It will make us stay in suffering. But desire is good, is necessary up to a certain point to maintain life, to maintain a trajectory. So here, this is not what it's referring to. This is talking about the desire or craving for more and more and more and more. Because that's how we end up in re-becoming. And once we are at that stage, bhava, because that means we have passed the point of upadana, which is grabbing and holding on. And once you're at the stage of re-becoming, you already have primed your mind, you have primed yourself to be reborn. Jati. Now you have to face what's coming after that. Old age, sickness, decay, and death, and everything else that follows. So understanding is what's going to cut the cord of samsara for us. That's the umbilical cord that we need to cut to make sure that the one that we have right now, that been, the result of which, the last umbilical cord from this, in this life, from our mom that brought us into this world, let's make that umbilical the last umbilical to ever be cut. And be done with this. Having wisely used and overcome the 5 hindrances, the bhikkhu now lives unburdened, free, untroubled, safe, and secure. Thus the bhikkhu gives up this shore and the one beyond, much like a snake giving up its used-up skin. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. There's also, at times you might see in maybe in real life, a snake that has a little bit of its old skin left, tagging along, and it hasn't been able to remove it fully. The old sloth or the slough. Dead cells of its previous self. You can think of it as an Arahant who's still alive. Having the 5 aggregates, still having to deal with this body, walking among us, eating, sleeping, walking, doing things. And there were thousands of them around the Buddha who were still alive, Arahants, but with some skin left from the past. So that's an image that you can take also with you. But it's a wonderful image to have and to help us again in our practice. Because ultimately, it's not agitation that we want. It is an untroubled state of being, untroubled. untroubled not by external fact, because we cannot control external. That's why Lord Buddha was saying the world is changing all the time. The world is not what it seems to be. You will know this for yourself. And then your fighting will become less and less until there's none left fighting with the world. Why? Because the safety that you've been seeking, because that's what people who want to change the world really are seeking. It's not bad intentions usually. People want safety, security. People want certainty. Unfortunately, we will never find that in the world outside. That's what the Dhamma is saying. The only place, that's what the other shore is all about, by the way. The farther shore. It's not somewhere over there either. These are just terms. This is just used as syntax or just words to help us make room in our mind to start welcoming such states to occur in us. When was the last time you actually had an untroubled moment that you lived, you know, you remember? When was the last time you really felt safe? You truly felt secure? That's completely, in a way, self-generated. In other words, it's not coming in from the outside world. It's independent of the outside world because it's a state of mind that you facilitated for it to develop in you. A person who practices sila, they don't have to worry about much. Because you know, a person who's speaking the truth, they don't have to worry about remembering details. A person who lies has to remember. I think it was Mark Twain who said that. Like, you know, the great thing about telling truth is that you don't have to remember a thing. You just say it like it is because you remember what you did. You have no, it's like you don't have to, you know, worry. It gives you a sense of ease, doesn't it? You don't struggle and like climbing a rock face. But, you know, that's what we need to bring. Because it's lighter, too, when the snake has removed the old skin. So my invitation is that we practice how that feels like. You know, Lord Buddha would bring in, you know, when new students would come, he would send those students, if he wasn't going to be teaching them, and this was in the earlier days, but later on he wasn't able to teach so many, so he would send them to be trained and become attendants to other students of his, right? So you had Venerable Sariputta, who had around him students who were leaning, who had the same type of thinking as their teacher. So they were around him like satellites around the planet or star. They had Venerable Mahamoggallana, who had around him students, attendants of his, who had the same constitution, the same interests, the same ways of understanding. Same thing with Venerable Ananda, same thing with Venerable Mahakassapa, Venerable Revata, etc. They gravitated to each other. They were influenced by each other. They grew. They grew. When especially the students would see their teacher, the Arahant, living Arahant, looking, they were observing, they were being impressed, they were being jolted into the reality to let go of their past and their future and be present. There might be some mimicking involved. That's okay. But even more so important is becoming inspired by that teacher, inspired enough to be moved into the Dhamma. That's the fastest way you can drop into that state, because you have a living example in front of your eyes. As the sasana was, as after Lord Buddha's death, as the monks were, the Arahants were becoming less and less, the newer generation of monks didn't have that opportunity. So what you had was it became a downward spiral. You got lousier and lousier crops, unfortunately. I'm now translating the last verses or last sections of the Theragatha, and I just came across, I'm still working on it. Venerable Pussa Thera. Whoa, when I'm done, I'm already blown away with his ability to foresee the future as to what will happen in the Sangha. And I'm like, you have to pause because he's giving a history lesson or documentary as to what has happened and what is happening. Is basically reflective of what we see in the world today. So the less you have those examples around you, the harder it is to really become inspired. But those monks really were inspired. So why am I saying this? Because they start to give themselves the kindness that's necessary. Lord Buddha never taught with a stick in his hand or a sword to beat people up with. He had different ways of shaking people up, but you would never see him, forcefully teach someone. But he would teach them with his behavior, with his attitude, and that gives the person the sense of safety to be around. The same thing happens in therapeutic sessions. For years, I would notice this. Even before then was high school sessions when you see the person and it's like they're terrified, this and that. They don't trust adults. And so you listen, you go eye level, you listen to them. You show them humanity. You give them the trust in adults, caretakers, so that they can start seeing themselves with love, with trust. And you walk away, you pull away, you let them do their thing to develop. Same thing in therapeutic sessions. The person who comes in feeling so like with so many holes, like a sieve, no trust towards themselves, anger, frustration, a victim, no safety. But given the therapeutic, it's called the therapeutic alliance, fancy term, but basically you're making them feel comfortable enough to see another human being, and maybe first human being they ever encountered in life. But that the whole point is to allow them to take that beautiful energy field and turn that on them and start seeing themselves with those eyes with which I would be looking at them as their therapist. Same thing here. Can you look at yourself with eyes of safety? But it takes work. It requires maintenance. And when you're doing that, when you're living according to the Dhamma, don't worry, the mind will drop into states of tranquility, even when you don't want it to. When you're interacting with other people and saying, and your mind is like, there's nothing. There's nothing, and the person is talking to you, you're completely aware, you're saying, and you really have to look for thoughts to come up so that you can interact with them in a conversation. Because the mind is so tranquil, it's so pekka. Come on, I have to be more agitated with this because I have to sync up with them. No, just observe. That's also a lesson because you're safe. And the person suddenly realized that they don't have to speak so much. The beauty of quietude and serenity. I will leave you with that. And actually, I will pause here, see if there are any questions. Well, if there are none, let us transfer some merits. Akasatha Jabumata Deva Naga Mahidika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakantu loka sasanam. Akasatha Bhumata Devanaga Mahindika Punyantang Anumoditva Chirang Rakantu Desana. Akasatha Bhumata Devanaga Mahindika Punyantang Anumoditva Chirang Rakantu Mamparanti. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. May you be protected by the power and blessings of the Triple Gem. May you and your loved ones live in harmony, in peace, without pain, without suffering, with understanding. And may your practice grow, and may your virtues grow as you make the most of this life, this great, great, great opportunity to having encountered the Dhamma in this life in human form, where you're able again to marvelously appreciate it. It's that is a miracle in this day and age, to be born as a human when there is still Dhamma and you come to the Dhamma, you want to listen and practice the Dhamma. That is miraculous to me. So may you go all the way as Lord Buddha intended. May we heed the call of the Dhamma that Lord Buddha bequeathed upon us, that he trusted us with his Dhamma. May we be earning the right to be called Buddha's children one day by becoming Arahants ourselves. Sukhi Hood.